We're joined by Ho Kwon Ping. You are the founder of the Banyan Tree Hotel Group. You're also chairman of MediaCorp and chairman of Singapore Management University. Mm-hmm. You've been speaking to the MBAs here at Insead on the Asia campus about values and business. And the session revolved around a quote from your wife, which was that you're a capitalist in your wallet, a socialist in your heart. You definitely still seem to be something of an idealist.
Idealist is perhaps more so than a socialist in my heart, because I think I've been disabused of that notion for quite a while now as an economic model. But you know, I think that whatever you are or have been during your most formative years, in your late teens to your late 20s, let's say in those very important 10 years, it will always have an impact on your life in later years. And those 10 very critical years, I was very involved in what I considered to be idealistic ventures that led me into trouble, but they were political activism, social activism. Today, as a responsible pillar of the establishment, married, grown-up children, etc., of course one has to be far more different in one's exposition of those values, but they are still there. They are still captured within what I and my wife and others try to do with Banyan Tree, or what we've tried to instill as values in SMU.
Well, it has been a remarkable rehabilitation in some ways. As you were saying in the session that you were thrown out of Stanford University, you were in prison. In Singapore, you were a journalist with the Far Eastern Economic Review. I saw one article from the Business Times that considered you something of a firebrand. You were detained under the Internal Security Act, and you were talking about how you were in solitary confinement. And from there you are now a pillar of the establishment with MediaCorp, with Singapore Management University. And that does really seem remarkable.
Quite unexpected, I must say. But that's what life is about. It's all about change. It's about embracing the realities that you come to recognize. I spoke also about my own awareness, growing self-awareness of what I was doing that was not true to myself. And I think, if anything at all, I think I had the courage to recognize that much of what I was doing wasn't really contributing to the betterment of the world. It was in many ways a sham and a game, and that I should apply myself to other things. And so I've tried to do that, to apply myself to bettering the world in other ways. And the idealism is somewhat, I wouldn't say dampened, it's matured, and it's become more realistic.
So how do your values then guide your business principles?
I think the same values that guided what I did that got me into trouble are not that different today. It is, and it's not that different from what caused me to want to study development economics in university and to become a writer on development economics in the Far Eastern Economic Review, and what caused me to accept a position with Insead as a research fellow before I left to join our family business because my father had a stroke. And that's essentially rooted in what I came to realize in my formative years, that there is a lot of poverty in the world, there's a lot of underdevelopment, a lot of inequality, and that the responsibility of people who live in a richer world or have come from a richer personal background as I have is to use the means that we have, not necessarily to be or charity workers or Mother Teresas and to be absorbed totally in guilt. I don't think we need to have any of that. We can be very happy, prosperous business people engaged in creating a prosperous company, as I hope that we're doing with Banyan Tree, and still at the same time being able to contribute to economic development and the betterment of people's livelihoods in places which need improvement. Fundamentally, I think the main thing I've learned is that there need not be a dichotomy between being a good capitalist businessman and a person who wants to improve the world. The two should not be dichotomous. Unfortunately, businessmen either feel they're dichotomous or they're actually very shy about saying that they have bigger goals in business than just maximizing shareholders' profits, as if it's a dirty word to say that you care about corporate social responsibility. The prevailing ethos, which I think thankfully is changing in the US because of the complete failure of self-absorbed CEOs to do anything that's socially useful, and the social recognition that these people are absolutely have done nothing for the world, has at least now resulted in a situation where one does not have to be embarrassed to say, I am a successful CEO and I embrace CSR. Before, it was like a sign of manhood. The more macho you were, the more you would say, I don't give a damn about corporate social responsibility because only the wimps care about that. I only build profits. I mean, that has been the ruling mentality for a long time. And there was that mentality which, in my view, led partly to the near collapse of Wall Street capitalism.
And you have railed against greed within the investment banking community in various speeches, that sort of Gordon Gekko attitude that greed is good.
Yes, and I think, I don't really care about the people who have been practicing it. I don't know them, they're not in my world, I don't care to know them, I don't respect them, and they're somewhat irrelevant to me. What I care about is an ethos in a society and in business schools where they and their examples are held as paragons of virtue, and where impressionable, idealistic young business students think that to be the CEO of a major Wall Street bank is in fact something glorious that they want to become one day. That appalls me, that worries me, because it means that we're going to continue this cycle of totally self-serving greed. And it's the younger people that I worry about. I don't really care about those people. Eventually they will go to jail, or they can retire happily with their millions, and it's, their history.
What about the arguments that the prime goal within business is shareholder maximization, and beyond that, companies shouldn't be looking to do things within communities and beyond? I
think if you go back and look from a quasi-economic history and political history perspective, you'll find that embedded in that very simple difference, what seems to be a very small and subtle difference in concept between shareholders' interests and stakeholders' interests, lies a huge gulf in ideological thinking, which essentially started with Karl Marx and ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union. In those two words, you have seen the whole 20th century conflict between communism and capitalism at the two extremes. And in Europe, a lot of that debate has gone on because social democracy was a response to both communism and capitalism as the two extremes, unfettered capitalism. So to me today, this debate isn't over. The debate should continue, because if you take the view that in a capitalist structure, maximization of shareholders' interests, measurement of economic profit, etc., total shareholders' returns and all that sort of thing, that shareholders' returns are the only thing that should concern a CEO, that debate would take you in one clear direction. Because in that case, CSR isn't really necessary, a lot of things are really not necessary. So long as I give the highest returns to shareholders, I should be given the highest possible short-term bonus. And it's totally logical. If, however, you just slightly change that definition of shareholder to stakeholder, the KPI and the metric for CEOs completely change. And if you define the welfare of the community and customers, etc., as being as important, or at least having some degree of importance, and you're willing to work towards a model that perhaps you even weight it and have some metrics that can measure it, because measuring shareholders' return is very simple. Measuring stakeholders' return is a vague, airy-fairy, touchy-feely kind of thing. But if economists can actually come out with a method by which you can measure it, like some people are talking about, instead of gross domestic product, you should talk about gross national happiness, and therefore infant mortality should be one of the indicators, for example, and so on and so forth. If you can actually have some other quantifiable KPIs for what maximizing stakeholders' interests are, then I think we would have gone a long way in shifting values within society.
Just finally, one interesting quote that you made was that the greatest danger of success is hubris. And you talk about hubris quite a lot in terms of the business world. What do you think is the key danger there?
Oh, I think hubris to me is a disease like blindness, because what it does is it prevents you from seeing the world. You can't see reality anymore. You've got this veil over you, and it is as bad as blindness, because it essentially, you see the world only in the way you think you would like to see it. You've lost the ability to actually see the world from a detached perspective. That essentially to me is a danger of hubris. It is not from a moral perspective alone that I say, oh, it's bad to be egotistical, we should all be humble. That's a moral perspective. Why I rail against hubris is because, in fact, there's been a business school study. Something like 75% of the companies that fail ultimately can be sourced to hubris on the part of the CEO or the founder. That essentially all the warning signs were already there. And that it did not require an expert to see it. Any normal human being would have seen it. And such warnings have been sounded. But the leader failed to take any action because the leader could not, for the sake of his life, see beyond his own hubris and recognize reality. And I think that is the biggest danger, and that has actually objectively led to the demise of many enterprises.
How have you avoided it?
Several sayings. There's personal hubris and there is corporate hubris. I think one way to avoid corporate hubris is to be, and Singapore has avoided it in some ways, actually for a very successful country, Singapore is never content to rest on its laurels. And that's to take what Andy Grove, the founder of Intel, had as a title of his book, which is Only the Paranoid Survive. Always be paranoid. Always think that your company is going to go down the drain tomorrow. If you think that, then you can't possibly exhibit hubris. You're always worried that you're on the verge of demise. So on a corporate level, I think that's one attitude, a culture that you can build. Never think you have arrived. Always think, my God, we're almost there. Be proud of the company, but we are facing dangers every day. That's one good attitude to take. The second one, on a personal level, is the saying that take life very seriously, but never take yourself seriously. And one important thing is to have a wife and children who constantly tell you when you're back home how hopeless you are, how you can't do this, how you can't do that, how you're not really the great guy that you think you are, when everybody else in the company tells you how great you are. You've got to have people who are close to you who will tell you, we love you, but don't you think you are the best thing since baked bread. And I think we should value those people in our lives, which very often is our spouse, is our partner who will say that.
Bring us back to earth, really.
Yes, absolutely.
Ho Kwon Ping, thanks for joining us on Insead Knowledge.
Not at all. My pleasure.